This is June the 23rd. No, it's not. It's June the 27th. Forgive me. We are recording this for WMD, the WMD-Channel. This is our third episode. And we are recording this. I am Oliver Boyd Barrett. I'm talking with Samantha Inu Konda. And we are recording on Saturday, June the 27th. Finally got the date right there, Samantha. We've both of us are extremely aware of the momentous developments that are going on. A major advance, a major development of some kind practically every day of the week. And here at WMD, we're trying our very best to make sense of these developments from a broad geopolitical point of view. We've loosely agreed that some of the major things that we really need to be addressing today obviously include the situation in the Gulf between Iran and the United States and the other parties to this conflict. We also are very aware of the involvement in this conflict of two of the world's most important powers, other than the United States. Well, I should say three, because we will have to talk about three, I'm quite sure. But those three will be India, China, and Russia. So I think that's primarily what we're proposing to talk about today. And we are aware that the Gulf conflict feeds in to some of the other major conflicts in the world that are going on right now, in particular the conflict over Ukraine between Russia and NATO. So let me pass it over to you, Samantha.
Yes, thank you, Oliver. That sounds like a reasonable proposition. So I would like to start with the recent ceasefire violations in Lebanon and the Strait of Hormuz. So I wanted to know what you make of those.
Yeah, well, both of these ceasefires that you mentioned in Lebanon and, of course, in the Strait of Hormuz are deeply interrelated. We have a memorandum of understanding. We still have it in extremely fragile state, signed between the United States and Iran. And one of the most important, in my view, one of the most important components of that agreement is that there needs to be, that Israel has to stop its aggression in particularly in the south of Lebanon, although Israel's aggression in Lebanon doesn't stop in the south of Lebanon. It goes into Beirut, and at times it goes north of Beirut. Israel was not a direct party to the MOU, but the MOU, in my view, has been signed by Iran in the belief that the United States has the power to bring Israel to heel. With respect to its aggressions in the Lebanon. This clearly is, well, there are at least two points of view here. First of all, we can see that Israel's aggression continues. Its invasion certainly continues. Is this because the United States is simply unable to bring Israel to heel? Is it that the United States would like to be able to bring Israel to heel, but simply cannot think of a possible way of bringing Israel to heel, like, for example, stopping the flow of US arms to Israel, which makes Israeli aggression possible? Or is it, and in my view, this is far more likely, the United States just doesn't have the heart to try to bring Israel to heel, for many reasons, not least of which Donald Trump's political fortunes up until now have rested considerably on the donations to him by very, very powerful Israeli donors. Madeline, I'm forgetting her name for one moment. So I think that this is the latter. The United States has agreed with Iran that if there is to be peace, then peace in Lebanon is part of this peace, but it is not willing to do what it has to do in order to make this happen. Therefore, I'm tempted to conclude, and you may disagree, I'm tempted to conclude that the United States simply is not serious about this. It's not that Iran has for 1 second indicated that it isn't serious about this. So that's the main problem in this, with respect to this intertwining of the issues of ceasefire. If I, before handing over to you, Samantha, I just would like to make the one further point that we have this strange phenomenon, and it's not for the first time in recent years, of ceasefires that are clearly not ceasefires. And yet both parties to agreements act as though somehow the fact that there is no ceasefire in itself is a reason to bring the discussions to a halt. In the case of Lebanon, we've still got, even yesterday or the day before, we had a meeting, I think it was in Washington, where Israel and Lebanon agreed a ceasefire. That is to say, the Lebanese government, which is not the same as Hezbollah. And here in the Gulf, we have a ceasefire, which isn't a ceasefire, but both parties seem to continue talking at some level, whether in Qatar, or I think it's mainly Qatar now, or in Geneva.
Yeah. So, Marco Rubio was in Gulf visiting close allies, UAE, Bahrain, and Kuwait, which were particularly hard hit. And during his visit, he said that Iranian regime is a regime of religious lunatics. And so that kind of characterization goes against what J.D. Vance has been saying. And Donald Trump himself has tried to suggest that they are rational actors. Vance went online, and he's actually admonished Israel. So how do you see these conflicting signals from the administration? Are they further proof of lack of seriousness, or is there some friction within maybe the Republican Party?
Yes, there certainly is. There certainly are frictions in the Republican Party, and there are certainly, I think, real frictions between the United States and Israel. Only those frictions are nowhere near severe enough to bring about what I indicated a moment ago would have to happen if the United States was serious about getting Israel out of Lebanon, which would have to be a threat to stop the supply of arms to Israel. You've mentioned a statement recently made by Mark Rubio, who is the United States Secretary of State, and that prompts me to just call attention to what I consider to be the gross incompetence of the current U.S. administration in the matter of diplomacy, and this reveals itself time and time again. I'm aware, of course, that these parties may be acting ideologically in the belief that older patterns of diplomacy were not effective, they did not serve the US interest, and that there are, in their eyes, better ways of doing this. I humbly beg to differ. I think that what we see is gross incompetence, gross lack of intelligence, reckless behavior by people who have been entrusted by the voters of the United States to behave professionally, to behave competently, to behave on the basis of actual evidence and knowledge and clear, rational analysis. I see no sign of any of these things. We had an egregious example, I believe, happened just a week after the MOU was signed, at the very beginning of the negotiations in Geneva last weekend, when Donald Trump actually, and this was a violation of the very first paragraph of the MOU, which is a commitment to rational and peaceful, non-threatening dialogue. Donald Trump threatened actually to kill the negotiators. And he also threatened, in effect, not for the first time, to annihilate the nation of Iran. So that, to my mind, is a problem. And I wasn't aware of this until 1 or 2 days after this had happened. But I am glad to say that the senior Iranian negotiators in Geneva, when this happened, they did as they surely had to do. They withdrew. They withdrew. But this is a situation of amazing nuance, because even though they withdrew, their withdrawal did not affect continuing discussions going on in the so-called technical committee. There are 4 of these committees. They kept talking, and we keep getting reports of things that they have agreed, or sometimes we get reports of things that we're told that they agreed, but then one party or the other tells us, no, we didn't agree that at all. It is usually a case of the United States saying, yeah, we've agreed this, and then an Iranian spokesman comes in and says, no, we didn't agree. We didn't agree that. So that's another element, really, of the extraordinary confusion that results from a lack of competence, a willingness I have to say, on the part of the United States, because I don't see it on the part of Iran, a willingness on the part of the United States to lie, whether for very, very short-term public relations goals or for some other peculiar reason that I can only guess at. And then, if I might, just one final thought on this aspect of the negotiation process, Samantha. One thing that strikes me as very odd here is the continuing use of these 2 gentlemen, Jared Kushner, son-in-law, as you know, to Donald Trump, and then his former real estate business billionaire buddy, Steve Witkoff. Neither of these are professional negotiators. Neither of them, until forced into this role by Donald Trump, have much by way of international negotiation experience or international experience, full stop. Both of them are implicated indirectly, at least indirectly, in some of the most horrific violations of diplomatic protocol that we have witnessed, I think, in our lifetimes, namely in the middle of a negotiation for there to be a strike by one party against the other, a violent act of aggression, or threats to, or even the killings of negotiators. Now, I'm not saying that either gentleman was directly party to any of these events, because I don't know, I can't say. But the mere fact of their proximity to these events, the fact also that both men, I would say, profess sympathy for, if not enthusiasm for, Zionism. Both parties are extremely well connected in Israel. If the United States is negotiating in good faith with Iran, it would not use these gentlemen. It would appoint people who are fresh to this domain of diplomacy who are knowledgeable and professional in terms of diplomacy and negotiating experience and so on, who are
Yeah.
not clearly aligned to one side, to one party to the conflict, and who are clearly acting and behaving in professional in a professional manner and in good faith. The fact that
Yeah.
the fact that Washington continues to use these guys, to my mind, means either Washington or the Trump administration or Trump himself, I'm not quite sure quite where to lay the blame, are really, really stupid, or simply they're not serious, they don't care.
Yeah, I think the pattern is emerging, and even mainstream Western media is writing about it. It's yeah, deep personal and family ties appear to influence the deal making that President Trump uh, likes to take credit for. And you have Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner everywhere. Yeah, so what Western media, mainstream media is reporting is Steve Witkoff was sent to Russia because Trump and Trump organization are interested in minerals and oil in the vast resources of Russia. So unlike other Western leaders so far who have who have been very hostile to Russia, as you understand, and as most people in the global South would agree, they see it as the Ukraine conflict as a proxy war against Russia. Though I don't find a lot of coverage to the war except instances, but the general perception is that it's but Trump seems to be interested in some resources to begin with. And yeah, we've seen those Albanian people protesting quite ferociously against their prime minister
Yeah.
after so their peers, and we see that with Israel as well. Apparently, Trump's sons are involved in some drone manufacturing there, and yeah, and there is something with cryptocurrencies going on with Pakistan, which has helped it find this role of negotiator. So yeah, so political seriousness, it's obviously a question, and it also appears that there is the traditional U.S. interests. We can call it the deep state interest or the Zionist lobby or the Israel lobby or whatever term we use, is particularly unhappy with this outcome. And to me, it also appears that Mujtaba Khomeini said that he's not interested in negotiations, but Pezeshkian convinced him. So he's just going to try it out. And the way JD Vance has been deployed and the way Pezeshkian has been deployed, the two the topmost leaders are both Trump and Mojtaba Khamenei are kind of insulating themselves from the yeah um, and and there is anger in Iran. I've seen videos of women taking up arms around in the coastal villages. Should there be an attempt to start a ground invasion? So there is a lot of pressure, and we've seen Arakchi kind of take back some of his comments, and so yeah, there is this kind of mistrust. But the civilian administration there appears to be interested in peace and believes that if they get peace on their terms, it would benefit Iran, which is obvious. If the terms of MOU are adhered to by US and its allies, this would normalize
Yeah.
Iran to an extent. However, I find it interesting. Some people have pointed that. Yeah, that China is resuming selling its refined oil from July 1st. And some people read it as a kind of faith in the process, that this process is likely to move forward. And there are also yeah, there are also reports that there has been demand destruction in China, so that may be the cause. People are have moved on to EVs. EVs constitute more than 50% of and also there has been some kind of industrial slowdown, perhaps related to the same thing. It's a largely export-driven economy, so any of those could be the reason. So I'm trying to take cues from China as to what it thinks, what its intelligence agencies think. Um, yeah, if you have anything to say on that, since we were
Sure.
going to talk about China.
Sure. Yeah. And I would like to get to China. May I just pick up on one point that you said, Samantha? You referred back to the key negotiators, Iran's Aragchi, and then, of course, the United States Vance. Another problem that I have about the honestly, I have my doubts as to whether there should have ever been a beginning to these negotiations in the way that we have seen, not least because the mere fact that Aragchi and the other gentleman who
Galipov.
thank you, the mere fact that they have engaged with the highest level negotiators, including Vance. Uh, um, Knowing what we know about the US side and the US mode of operandum in this kind of situation, there is a worry that it may cast doubt on the integrity of a domestic doubt in Iran as to the integrity of these negotiators. That is to say, of the Iranian negotiators, because everybody knows that when it comes to bribery, blackmail, any easy way of spending money that will bring about a short-term solution to its objective, it is so easy to be compromised by the United States, even when you don't mean to be or don't want to be. You have to be extremely cautious. And I fear that Iran has not been sufficiently cautious here, and that they ran the risk of inciting domestic suspicions and feeding domestic rivalries. Now, I don't mean to say that I know that
Yeah.
any such thing happened. I simply doubt the wisdom of Iran having entered into negotiation in the way that this has occurred. Anyway, I've got that off my chest.
Yes. Yeah. So
Yeah.
let me throw some of my ideas on the same
Okay.
thing.
Okay.
I think, yeah, so these people are, fairly experienced negotiators on behalf of Iran, and they did not participate in the press conference, if you noted. So they went to Geneva. They didn't participate in the press conference, and the press conference was done by U.S. Vice President, representatives of Pakistan and Qatar.
Yeah.
Now, it yeah, eventually the Iranian power structure, there is a kind of a veto or control wielded by the supreme leader. And Galibov has himself been, yeah, a perpetual presidential candidate. So it does appear like, Arakchi, Pezeshkian, Galibov are slightly softer than what IRGC is, though Galibov is himself a IRGC commander. Yes, I mean, what you said is correct. That the mood in Iran and these negotiations, there is a bit of conflict. However, I think these are also the positions have also been shifting. Initially, it's appeared like Galibov was a bit harder than Arakchi and Pezeshkian, but we have seen that the Strait of Hormuz has opened, and now about 70 oil tankers are moving out. So this is about half the routine traffic, but that itself is a great relief. So I believe Iran has been under pressure from various different countries to resume these kinds of negotiations so that the oil can flow again. And I think that serves the wider interests of the world, Asia, Global South, and even United States.
But
So
I'm very, I mean, Samantha, I wonder whether you agree. I'm very pleased to see, just as I'm very pleased to see that Iran has acted with enormous integrity on the question of Israel in Lebanon, Israeli aggression in Lebanon. I'm also very pleased to see that Iran is acting with enormous integrity this week and over the last 48 hours with respect to its insistence that it controls the Strait of Hormuz. So we saw on Thursday there was an attack by Iran on a tanker that was following a route close to the south of the strait. On the Omani side, and that then precipitated some US retaliation yesterday. And then again today, there was another Iranian strike on another tanker, I'm not totally sure of the details just yet, but it also looked as though this tanker also was not adhering to the route that Iran has required tankers to pass through, but has been towards the Omani side. And then there have been some fairly severe, but we don't yet know, there have been some fairly severe retaliatory strikes by the United States following. So all of this is going on in the midst of a so-called ceasefire, which may but may not, we don't know. It may bring an end to the... And following your earlier reference to prices, but we have to wait, I suppose, until Monday. Will this have a significant impact on oil prices through?
Yeah. So there are two related issues that I would like us to move on to. One of them is the role of Oman, and the other is oil prices, which I would like to share some speculations that I heard on, no concrete evidence, but the game of oil prices.
Okay.
And what's going on there. Yeah, I mean, some of these speculations over a period of time we will know if they were right or not. But yeah, the role of Oman and as a context, as a broad context, I want to make a broader historical point as to the partitioning of India, creation of Pakistan, creation of Israel around the same time. And these GCC countries whose borders were also sketched by imperial powers. So they were kind of all built and developed as dependencies, states that are going to perpetually depend on the West for their security. And of course, Pakistan has diversified through its relationship with China. And other countries like Saudi Arabia seem to be acting in similar lines. Um, Oman, which has been a historically neutral country, I mean, in a way, I feel a bit sad for Oman. It wasn't party to conflict, and it appears to be in a tough spot right now. Um, what do you make of its situation, and who may be bringing pressure on it? And we've seen the president of the United States say that he's going to bomb Oman as well, and it appears to be on the receiving side of both.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's both of its friends. Oman is perhaps it's the oldest U.S. ally in the region. The relationships goes back to 200 years. And Oman was the chief negotiator, and there is no indication that Oman was anything but a professional negotiator.
Okay.
So it is, yeah, it has good relations in the region with everybody. A region which is very fraught with conflict.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of like the Switzerland of Middle East, West Asia, if you like.
Yeah.
So yeah.
No, I agree. It's very important, and it's also quite puzzling, I think. We've known for some time now that Iran was totally open to the possibility that Iran and Oman would partner in the control of shipping through the strait and out into the Arabian Sea, and that sounded like a very friendly possible result, which made absolutely good sense because the national waters of Iran, 12 and a half miles, national waters of Oman, of course, are also 12 and a half miles. And they're going to more or less meet in the middle. Although, I'm not there. I don't have a measuring tape. I'm not exactly sure at which point and how wide a stretch of water we are talking about at each point. Some press reports seem to suggest it's a kind of middle route that manages somehow not to be in the national waters either of Iran or of Oman. I'm not sure that's true, but I'm not sufficiently expert to be able to make a commentary about that. But what is so disappointing is the fact that there seemed to be a very gentlemanly, very professional sort of a conversation, almost an agreement, it seemed to me, that there would be these two political entities would constitute a joint authority over this stretch of water. And now, all of a sudden, we find that it appears that Oman has lent itself as a result, presumably, of US pressure, or is it UN pressure? Because in press reports, we're hearing a great deal about this body called the International Maritime Organization. And we're being told that this is some kind of thing that this UN body, IMO, has worked out with Oman to provide a route. And this, to me, this is true, and I've no reason to think it isn't, then I am staggered because here we have, in the midst of an incredibly globally sensitive set of negotiations, with respect to the passage of oil and all these other commodities, fertilizer and so on and so on and so forth. There's hardly anything more sensitive right now in the world. And all of a sudden, a UN agency, IMO, just wades in and starts negotiating with one party in a manner that's almost certainly going to stall the process of the MOU negotiations. Now, I have some thoughts about this. One thought, I'm not saying it's the most important or the most relevant, but I think, oh my God, here again, it's a question, because I don't know. Is this another instance of a UN agency going rogue because it has been captured by neocon elements in the UN power structure and hierarchy, similar to the history of the IAEA, which has also played a very rogue and dirty role, I believe, in the U.S.-Israeli attacks on Iran, and then also the OPCW, the strange role that the OPCW had in coming to unsupportable conclusions about who was responsible or if there had even been chemical attacks in Syria, and then finding some extremely strange and underhand political machinations going on within the OPCW. Is this yet another example of a row? I'm beginning to think yes, possibly. And once again, the UN turns out to be not just a disappointment, but actually a player who shares culpability for some of the worst aggressions by the West against the global South in recent history.
Yes. Yeah. So Strait of Hormuz, the uncertainty around it, I think continues to be an issue that needs to be monitored. Iran has made its position clear that in future it will be kind of the guarantor of traffic. It's asking for ships, the tankers, to register with it, though it's not charging anything right now. But yeah, it has also made it clear that in future it hopes to charge.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, and that seemed to be there is now some disagreement about the wording, I believe, but it did seem that that was something that the United States was prepared to live with, the idea of Iranian control over the
yeah,
strait. There was a disagreement about tolls, and then through the press and our own private contacts, we understand there is a conversation now going on. Well, what is the distinction between a toll on the one hand and a fee on the other? If you wanted to, we could go into that as it gets a bit technical,
yeah.
that particular debate. But it seems, this is why I say this is extremely sensitive. And it appears as though there had been an agreement that Iran would be in control. And also, everybody knew that Iran had been talking to Oman about a joint authority with respect to the southern part of the strait towards the Arabian Sea. So again, I have to say, I am just staggered by the sudden appearance in this conflict of the IMO.
Yeah, well, yeah, I mean, the Strait of Hormuz question is itself very interesting. We can revisit it in some of our future conversations. Yeah, it does appear it's more like fee than toll, but we can talk about these things in future, and also the plans of other countries.
Yeah.
But let's move over to another issue. So let me speculate on oil prices. All
Right.
right. So the oil prices, apparently, if in an ideal world, if we start having Iranian oil and then we start having Russian oil, and then the Strait of Hormuz issue is resolved, there is peace, and the tanker traffic is back. So then you have all the Gulf nations now, for instance, Kuwait and Qatar and Iraq, which have struggled to export. Perhaps some of them have been able to export through the Caspian and northern routes a bit. But yeah, in that kind of ideal world, now with Venezuela back in market and US also pumping up its production, what is likely to happen is that the oil prices will fall. And yeah, so the question is, who benefits from high oil prices? And it appears that from what I have heard is is that um, if the oil prices are low, then production of oil in the US and in Venezuela is not economically viable. US oil, the shale oil, or the Venezuelan heavy crude for investors to kind of get into these, the oil prices have to be sufficiently rewarding. And, it's like, the number I've heard is 85, which seems kind of higher side than what I would expect for something like that. Because, because eventually US and Venezuela would also want to be in the market, and if we remember oil prices before this war, 1 week before the war, one day before the war they were 73, but 1 week before the war they were close to 69, between 66 and 69, and that's been the price of oil for a while. So in a peaceful world, Gulf countries, Iran, Russia would be able to outsell Venezuela and US. And but there is another actor as well, and those are the monarchies. So apparently, the Saudi royal family would also like the prices to be around 85, because it is funding its future projects, um, like Neom city, right? So for that kind of a futuristic project, and as well as to keep their you know grip on the power, these are all very absolutist monarchies. They need higher oil. They could benefit from higher oil prices. I mean, right now, we are not in a place where we can speculate about a perfectly peaceful future where all of this will happen. But there appear to be interests which want to keep the oil prices higher, and that's that is some speculation on the oil price.
Yeah, yeah, an extremely important element, and so in essence, one of the questions, of course, that rises therefore is whether the conflict over the Gulf actually, or made a part, the agenda is partly, at least partly, about the price of oil, or about the price of energy. So I have a couple of thoughts about this, and I'm not. I'll, I'll see in a moment whether they're actually running in the same direction, or whether, as I fear, they may turn out to be contradictory. But no matter. Let me plunge in just for a couple of seconds. So one thought I have, just a quick thought in relation to what you have just said, is, of course, if this is partly about oil and oil prices, then Iran is also a beneficiary of high prices, and in a way, its exertion of greater control over the Strait of Hormuz is potentially a mechanism, we will see, a mechanism for, to some extent, nudging, influencing, impacting global oil prices. So that's just one thought I have. But at the same time, I'm acutely aware of the fact that Iran's most important consumer is China. China is primarily a consumer of oil, and doesn't like high prices generally. Is also a very powerful country, and it is a very important friend to Iran. In other words, I'm seeing there's a balancing out process here. Yes, people like high oil prices if they are oil producers, but at the same time, there are also kind of complex relations between each of these different oil producers and their most important consumers. So this kind of dynamic we also see naturally in the case of Russian oil. Russia has also benefited, or should have benefited. I mean, some people dispute this, but I believe it has benefited from higher oil prices, and we've seen some really extraordinary behavior, primarily from Europe, which since 2022 had every possible opportunity, has threatened or has actually implemented sanctions and other measures to interfere with Russian oil prices and the Russian distribution of oil, which interesting because this is directly against Europe's best economic interests, because Europe has forced itself into a peculiar situation of greater and greater dependence on very expensive, not just United States LNG, liquefied natural gas, but also on very expensive Russian LNG. What are we to make of this? I think so. Let me try this. I think what we are to make of this is, yes, let us be very cynically aware of the role that the prices of commodities, the impacts that these will have on political decision making. Absolutely, let's give them every bit of weight that they deserve, but also to recognize that these relations in energy markets don't occur in a vacuum. They occur in a very, very complex web of other relationships between nations. And that is where the business of prediction, I think, gets really quite complicated.
Yeah, I think two other related issues would be, UAE walking out of OPEC, and what I'm hearing in through Indian media, the perspective here, because India stands to gain as UAE is India's third largest trading partner, and it's been getting a lot of oil now from UAE. Yeah, I would also kind of come back to the other point that Iran used to be one of the largest, oil importers, or to India.
Yeah.
But right now UAE. So UAE is walking out of OPEC. It appears that UAE is planning for a post-oil world. It wants to pump out its oil fast and make the quick buck, and invest that in its cities like Dubai for AI, or future technology infrastructure, tourism, and it doesn't think that it has got a lot of time, and that is how it's reading this whole situation. And it plans to pump up oil from next year after walking out of OPEC, which controls oil. And yeah, OPEC itself was a response historically to British American control of oil prices. So they wanted to exert their own agency, but now UAE wants to walk out to increase its production. Russia is in OPEC plus, so it has some liberty to be both in OPEC and outside, and pump up as per its interests. So that's one of the things. The other interesting thing that I've heard is apparently the strikes on Qatar were not as bad as Qatari, emir and the Qatari government made out. But they wanted to put out these numbers that their production is down by 20% and force majeure. They are unable to supply for 3 to 5 years, maybe more. So they wanted to do that in consultation with Iran, to force the hand of, you know, uh, West America to work towards peace. And that is where they exaggerated their claims. And yeah, that's the other part. And now Qatar has emerged as the negotiator, I guess, on behalf of Gulf nations, and it appears to have good relations with Iran. And despite the early strikes, it has, and it was, I think, one of the earliest to come out and say that Iran is going to be here and we are going to be here. We've been here for more than 1,000 years. We just have to live together. So that kind of realization. So it appears that Qatar has played a role. I think these calculations are important. because United States is also under pressure, both internally and through its partners. And global South countries, whatever little agency they may have, they want the conflict to end. And I have previously pointed at statements by Indian Prime Minister in Europe, and the real worry that the decades of Indian growth is going to be wiped out, and people are going to go back to penury if this just goes on, and if there is a famine. And we also understand that this year the monsoon is very bad. There is El Nino, and years when it is too hot, the winds don't flow in from Pacific into the Indian subcontinent, South Asia. But they kind of, if they are more than 2 degrees above what they should be, then there is a reverse flow that sucks out the air, apparently. So it's an year of super El Nino.
Yeah.
It's an year of super El Nino. It's one of those very rare years, and already we've seen across the nation the monsoons are at 30%, and that is going to affect crop productivity. And 30% is not even a blanket figure; it's just the blanket figure. Some regions, some very important regions like central India, it's much lower. It's much lower than that. And in some regions, like Northwest, they've been about 50%. A very dire situation in very populated regions. So, yeah, I mean, it doesn't appear that United States thinks a lot about these things in any way.
No.
But somehow, in this interconnected world, in a sad, disproportionate way, in somehow, it reflects on oil reserves of and oil prices in United States as well. And there is an election coming up. Yeah.
Well, obviously, I think we're both agreed that one of the most important contexts in which to interpret the Gulf crisis is the issue of the transition from the United States' unipolar moment, which it experienced from the fall of the Soviet Union to well, I would put it to the Chinese accession to the World Trade Organization in 2001, following which China, which had already been expanding at enormous speed, just went into the economic growth, just went into the stratosphere, following its accession to the WTO, much to the surprise and dismay, of course, of the United States and the neocon community. So it's a very puzzling time. We are there are some indications surely that support the idea that yes, we are indeed moving towards a more multipolar world. We see this first and foremost in the BRICS. And in the politics of the BRICS. And one very, very important aspect of the politics of the BRICS has to do with energy, because within the BRICS, we have Russia, very major oil producer. We have the UAE, also a very important oil producer. And we have very significant consumers of oil, of which China and India are incredibly important. And one thing that's happened as a result of the Europe's, I think, incredibly misjudged Russophobia, orchestrated Russophobia narratives, Europe has been busily shooting itself in the foot, or in both feet and both arms, in its belly and in its head, by destroying its energy relationship to Russia. The most important consequence of that is that Russia has greatly increased its sales of energy, both to China and to India. China is not a problem because China so far has indicated it is willing to stand firm against US bullying, US attempts to sanction China or companies that deal with China if China continues to import oil from Russia. China has simply told its oil refinery, we don't care what Donald Trump says. Buy the oil, whatever, just buy it. So that in itself, I think that judgment by China, I think, is really the nail in the coffin of U.S. claims to unipolarity, or even U.S. claims to being a superpower. Even that period, I think, is coming to an end. Further, we know that the Power of Siberia pipeline is a major conduit of energy from Russia to China, and there is to be another pipeline that has now been started, Power of Siberia 2. What I believe this represents a consolidation of the alliance between Russia and China. The two countries cannot possibly survive without one another. Of course, in any alliance, there are going to be difficulties and tensions and problems. But this is an alliance which is just both countries absolutely existentially need it, much to the dismay of the United States and of Western Europe. And just a final quick thought, because and here I would like to very much hear more from you, Samantha. The relationship between India and Russia has been somewhat puzzling. India did become a much more important consumer of Russian oil in recent years, but has come under intense pressure from Donald Trump and his politics, his trade, and his tariff politics. He's imposed these very high tariffs on India and has offered to reduce these very high tariffs if India stops importing Russian oil. I think Trump claims that India has greatly reduced its importation we're not sure, but you may know better. At my end, I'm not sure that India actually has reduced its consumption. It may want to look as though it's reduced its consumption of oil, but there are some people out there who actually don't think it is. But you've mentioned this relationship between India and UAE. We know that India, much, way more than China, India has this strange fence-sitting relationship between the West and the East. I don't like it particularly because I think it just introduces another element of indecisiveness in this transition from unipolarity to multipolarity that the world just doesn't need right now, because we want to get rid of this bully in the United States. Because its influence everywhere is toxic and damaging to the long-term survival of the human race. Let alone the interests of any particular nation. So, but I'd love to hear from you, Samantha, a bit more about
Yeah.
this. Yeah.
Yeah, so I will deliver a lot of bad news, and this hedging, this kind of transactionality that you're talking about. I mean, at this point of time, when I see what's going on, I mean, I would rather prefer that hedging than just going and sitting in the American camp. This hedging. I mean, when we are talking about India, right? We remember that this was a decolonized country which had a long history of independence movement, which was one of the leaders of non-alignment. And over the years, it has championed the cause of Palestine, Cuba, apartheid in South Africa, and NWICO, with which you were also related. So, in a way, your politics, was kind of aligned with, and I think one. So I could talk about Russia, come back to this Russian oil issue, but I think one of the broader points I want to make from a very academic perspective is the impact of neoliberalism. And what is very critical here, I think the most critical aspect, I could leave it for the last, but I would like to throw it out since I'm talking to you. It may be more interesting if we are just talking to regular audience about various other things, but I think the most critical aspect from an academic point of view to make sense of what is happening is privatization. The non-aligned countries were non-aligned because they didn't want to get into a war, but they were actually closer. I mean, at least India was actually closer to the Soviet Union than it was to America. And it had a huge state enterprise. It had a huge state enterprise. Oil companies were state firms, and the largest oil field in India, Bombay High, was kind of excavated by the Russians, who gave it the production capacities, and it was a state run thing. And the Russians kind of embedded themselves into this kind of an architecture. Even now, India-Russia relations are very government-centric. But the private sector, now India is proposing to excavate more oil, in the Bay of Bengal around the Andaman Sea, where you have these islands, there can be gas reserves. Malaysia has found them. So it's the same tectonic plate, same there, and India is inviting Western companies with 18% revenue sharing model. So this is, yeah. So now you have Western private companies coming, and they are going to take money for bringing in technologies. So this is a very different model of excavation. Very different model of excavation, and increasingly India has private sector in oil and gas exploration. And the private sector is quite embedded with the Western, particularly American order. So with regards to Russian oil purchases, um, yeah, the best I can tell you from what I know, and I might not know everything, but if you look at the numbers, um, I mean, right now in June, India bought 40% of its oil from Russia, so 2.6 million barrels a day. That's quite a lot. But remember, the peak of US pressure was in January, before the start. And that time, India reduced its oil purchases to 1 million.
Uh,
So what the official, now you have to look at the official narrative. You got to look at the official narrative.
yeah.
So before that, I mean, after the closure of Strait of Hormuz, the oil imports went up, significantly up. But before that, to put things in context, India was importing 1.5 million barrels per day from Russia. And when the pressure was put, it did reduce to 1 million. So the pressure had some impact.
Right.
And we must remember, India was the most tariffed country in the world,
Mm.
along with Brazil.
Yeah.
And they were quite perturbed by that. So they did reduce, but they did not shut it down. And that reduction, so what we see is India kind of working very closely behind the scenes with US. So that kind of reduction gave Donald Trump, what he wanted to say, that India has stopped buying and India could buy. Uh, and India told, so the official narrative at that time was India buys wherever the oil is cheap.
Mm.
Again, very transactional,
Mm.
right? So we went to Russia because Russian oil was cheap. Now we go anywhere the oil is cheap. So we just buy whatever is cheap for our people. Now you have to say that because you know. Uh, So, so that was the narrative, and now we see a shift in the narrative, and this shift has been forced. This shift has been forced by the geopolitical happenings, which have made India kind of irrelevant to the scheme of things. So we see a possible case of hedging gone wrong. Now we see. So what happened is once the war started, America gave a waiver uh, to global South countries on Russian oil purchases. So once there was a waiver,
Yeah.
again the
Right.
oil prices, yeah. So India is yeah. So we also have to understand the domestic politics, and in the domestic politics, India did not increase the oil prices by any meaningful measure. Unlike other countries in the neighborhood, there were no forced, um, you know, closures. There were no forced, 3-day week policies. Oil prices went up by about 10%, and that too after a couple of months,
Yeah. Mm.
and slowly. So it did not increase the oil prices. Just while there was a effective doubling of oil prices in international market. Sometimes, yeah, India did not do that, and. So, uh, so while concerned individuals, knowledgeable people are very upset with India's policies, public anger is not there.
Mm.
Uh, they have managed. So we are, a shrewd politician is in charge of the country and who understands the politics. Um, but there have been hiccups, and you can see the main reason. You can see the official narrative now says it doesn't just say that we are going to be transactional. We'll buy from whoever. Now they say energy security is very important. It's like national security. So, what has brought this late realization is the question, and the other thing we must understand that unlike China, Indian oil purchases from Russia are kind of more expensive. India is paying more to buy Russian oil than China is paying for the same amount. And India is paying more because India buys in the spot market. China has long-term contracts. So long-term contracts insulate China from market pressures.
Mm.
It works for Russia, it works for China. Both countries have long-term relationships, and both countries are not thrown to the vagaries of marketplace. Energy security is tied to national security. I mean, India needs to learn from China. It's this whole business of we will only learn from United States.
Yeah.
I don't know how long that is viable. So India is buying from spot market. A Russian foreign minister has visited India a couple of times for BRICS, and we can talk about BRICS as well. India is the chair of BRICS, and both times he has suggested long-term contracts.
Yeah.
Uh, and LNG imports as well. So India does not have long-term contracts with Russia, so it buys in the spot market,
Yeah.
and that is putting both India and Russia in this kind of scenario where they are trying to second guess what happens tomorrow,
Mm.
and yeah, and that's a whole mess.
Yeah. Can I, that's fascinating. Thank you so much for all of that, Samantha. I'm just thinking, I'm looking at the Brent price now. I'm not quite sure whether this is a futures price or this is just the current spot price. But anyway, it's, as you would expect, it's sort of hovering between 72 and 73. So, which to my mind is rather, it does raise a question because the the price, of course, is now greatly reduced from its worst point earlier on in the crisis. I believe it reached 120 at the worst point. So now it's down to sort of 72-ish. And it seems to be staying there, even though practically anyone you talk to is incredibly skeptical about the chances of this MOU. So you kind of have you wonder. So what is it about these international traders? They don't seem to. They seem to be totally unflappable, and also they seem to be incredibly gullible. Anytime Trump says things are going to get better, they believe him, and they keep believing him. So this is all very strange. But one thing I've been thinking about recently, I've been posting about this. It's not my field, so of course my expertise is very limited.
Yes, of course.
But it is the question of alternative supplies. Why really is the Strait of Hormuz as important as it is? 20 to 25% of oil trade, along with trade in related products, as we know are very important, like fertilizers. And I've been thinking about alternative sources of supply. Surely anyone who's in the business has already been thinking, how can we reduce our dependence on Hormuz? That this has to be surely a key question in oil production. And we see, you've just given us a brilliant example of the potential that India has for increasing oil production. And you also had very interesting things to say about the role of Western corporations in this process as well. So I'm thinking, okay, so if India is going to be producing all this extra oil, India is not going to need to send all of this stuff through the Strait of Hormuz. And then we talked about Venezuela. Now, okay, we've seen the very terrible, awful. I mean, very soon, I hope, Samantha, we'll have an opportunity to talk about what's going on in South America. But of course, these earthquakes are just awful. But so far as I can see, the earthquakes have not impacted oil production as such in Venezuela. Although they have impacted things like electricity, they have impacted the ports, they've impacted some of the subsidiary infrastructure, if you will, that would impact Venezuela's ability to distribute oil. But my calculations suggested that if you look at the increase in oil that's already been demonstrated by Venezuela, if you look at the increase in oil that's been demonstrated by Guyana, which is next door, and by the way, which has a much more marketable form of oil than does Venezuela, and Brazil is not an insignificant player either. Brazil has also increased its oil product, and I'm sure you can find other parts of the world too, which demonstrate increase. So it brings us back to the nature of this crisis in the Gulf. How real is it really? And I haven't even begun to talk about alternative workarounds, if you will, supplying oil overland by train. Through southern Iran, there's a railway link apparently through Pakistan to China. And then on the other side, you've got Saudi Arabia, which has got a pipeline to the Red Sea. I know it's vulnerable to the Houthis and everything, but that is also not insignificant. So, okay, so Hormuz may have been important, but is it going to still be important? In 10 years?
Yeah.
Are we going to be worrying about Hormuz in 10 years?
Yeah, I think you're right. I think that is also what what I'm seeing, that Hormuz may not be as central. However, it will be important. It will continue to be important. This is a major oil producing region. It's the biggest oil producing region on the planet, which can produce oil for the cheapest price. Unlike other territories. I mean, this talk about exploration in India. So it's just an exploratory stage. So we don't know if there is oil, but there is a likelihood of gas, natural gas. There is a likelihood, but we haven't. I think one of the oil fields, they found some gas. They haven't come up with an estimate or anything. So we don't know if it would be large enough. So it's all at the stage of speculation. It is going to take 10 years for us to even do that. But yes, Venezuela, West Africa, Latin America, Brazil, these are real producers, and India is getting more oil right now from all these territories. So West African oil, and this Hormuz thing has not changed India's plans much. So the oil tankers, they are getting oil. So India is getting gas from America. US is now India's largest gas supplier, and yeah, I think they are also trying to please Americans perpetually. Um, there is, yeah, they are talking about this awful trade deal that is apparently imminent, but we'll have to talk about that one some other time. But anyways, that's besides the point. So there is a lot of gas purchase from yeah, so we heard the foreign minister quite proudly say that Russia is our greatest crude oil supplier, and America is our biggest natural gas supplier right now. So we are in this wonderful place. They are not really in a wonderful place. They are caught in a very difficult spot. And yeah, I think unfortunately for India, which has increasingly, over past few years, had a kind of Pakistan-centric policy. Now we see that Pakistan is able to balance, China and America in a much easier fashion.
Yeah.
Though it is, yeah, it is using that to bomb Afghanistan and also suppress Baluchistan. Yesterday, they, yeah, that's a separate issue. The doctor who was leading a peaceful protest was kind of sentenced to life imprisonment. So, but yeah, very smart, very smart. And as far as the oil negotiations go, I think its role needs to be appreciated. It's in the interest of global South, and yeah, it's not the spoiler. The spoiler has to be the Western, whether US or Israel. So India is buying oil from Latin America. So now Venezuelan oil is also American oil. So it is buying American oil. It's buying from Angola and Nigeria. So it has diversified. And what the Iranian oil is up for grabs again, but India is not buying it. The latest I heard, I mean, I've heard reports in Western media, New York Times, DW say that this is like a great relief for India. India can resume buying Iranian oil, which until 2018 was a major oil supplier to India. Indian refineries were actually built to process Iranian crude. And yeah, so that's an important dynamic which needs to be explored, perhaps in future in full.
Yes. Yeah.
Uh,
What,
and
what,
that
what, what are your thoughts about that, Samantha? What do you think is the reason for that? For India, if I've understood you correctly, you're saying that India is not increasing its purchase of Iranian oil. What are your thoughts about that? Why is that
So
happening?
India is not increasing the purchases. This is what I'm reading in Indian papers. There are conflicting reports in Western mainstream media that India will increase the purchases. There was a time where during the war there was a brief window when they allowed Iranian oil to be purchased, and India did purchase a small amount then. But right now, I think they have planned for until middle of August. The plans have already been made. The ships are out in the sea. Unlike Hormuz, which is so close to India that you just travel for a few days, once you're starting to source your energy from Americas, um, or even West Africa. It's not East Africa, West Africa. You got to go around the, Cape of Good Hope and, around the. So it's going to take months.
Mm.
So the tankers have already been dispatched.
Okay.
Everything is deployed, and the plans have already been made until middle of August.
Okay.
And this, Yeah, so we
I see.
see, yeah, and we also see that this is a 60-day waiver, and
Yep.
India doesn't know. India doesn't know if this 60-day waiver
Right.
will continue, will not continue, and yeah. So I think we are getting conflicting messages from India and China.
Okay.
I don't know. I don't know. This is again speculation. This is again speculation. Speculation. I feel that China is showing more confidence
Mm.
in. I mean, it just might be its internal confidence, nothing to do with the West Asia, but maybe it's confidence in the peace process. India is not showing that kind of confidence. Um, so yeah, if you look at the statements, the parliamentary statement of the prime minister, he's like, this is going to go on. This is going to be like another Russia situation. And but the sad part is India does not recognize unilateral sanctions. Official position: India does not recognize unilateral sanctions. It recognizes UN sanctions.
Hmm. Hmm.
But why does it adhere to US sanctions? Why did it, it stopped buying oil from Iran like this in
Hmm.
2018?
Hmm.
Now, yeah, I mean, so, yeah, so official position and the actual reality are different. They are increasingly looking for safe sources of oil aligned with America. Because
Yes.
those will be the ones which won't be sanctioned, and the private sector, particularly in India, the private oil sector is not going to take any risk. We have seen Indian private sector investments, major investments in American shale oil, the biggest single foreign investment in US,
Mm.
in Texas. We have seen private sector investment in Israeli port, and we should remember that IMEC has been the pet project of Indian Prime Minister, and we must remember that the realization that the INSGC, the Russia-Iran corridor, of which India remains a part,
Mm.
is uh, is on the back burner because of US sanctions. There is a growing realization in India that it's not going to serve. Uh, you know, I mean, that's the only gateway India has to Central Asia,
Mm.
given its relations with Pakistan. But uh, it is talking to
Mm.
United States. So the response you get from MEA briefing is we are talking to United States.
Yeah. Yeah.
We
How
are asking United States for a waiver. We are asking United States for a waiver so that we can continue our relationship with Iran, however limited it might be. So there is, if you look at the diplomats, seasoned diplomats, they are saying United States is the single most important country in the world. And these are old diplomats who have lived through the era of non-alignment, and they do not agree with what United States is doing. And you can see that Indian media, both on the right and left, does not agree with what US is doing. Indian people do not agree.
Mm.
But the state of the situation, I think this is the structural problem. United States is quite indispensable. So if you want long-term supplies, if you want to have safe long-term supplies, and we must remember, India was also buying limited amounts of gas from Venezuela. India had invested in Venezuela, so it is only after Trump presidency that they stopped buying gas from Venezuela, and after the kidnapping, now they have resumed buying the gas from Venezuela, and India has investments in Venezuela. India has made major investments in the Chabahar port in Iran. So yeah, but yeah, so there is both an element, I must say, there is both an element of coercion, and there is also an element of voluntariness to this move towards US. I mean, one of the most ridiculous things I've heard during the start of the Russian conflict, one of the advisors of the prime minister, an economic advisor, I mean, and that's not even the most ridiculous thing. We have to start talking about, statements coming from the apex leadership itself. That's a different issue. But this oil market expert who sits on the economic council was saying, yeah, India's place is not with authoritarian countries like Russia and China, but with America and the West. And I mean, so I call them the Greenland lobby. So these people are, disconnected elites who believe that India sits where Greenland sits, in between Western Europe and America, and they have nothing to do with Russia and China. And it's ahistorical, faulty geography. Uh, However, that optimism has now dimmed. Uh, I think, thankfully, one of the good impacts of Donald Trump is his language is not sophisticated, his actions are not sophisticated. So, unlike the US presidents who have sophisticatedly pulled India closer to their orbit uh, through underhand coercion, but on top, it has always been about democracy, whatever. But now there is, there has to be some, reality has to strike
Yeah.
home.
Yeah. I think kind of aware, Samantha, we kind of very close to the kind of time that we said that we would talk. I wonder whether we could. Well, I would just a couple of quick points from me, and then maybe we should perhaps just share with our audience what our thoughts are with respect to the likely outcome now of the Gulf crisis. If I may just come, very much welcome everything that you have explained to us. It's been very enlightening to listen to you. I think what you say further underlines the point I want to make, which is that in this process of transition, if that's what we see it as, from towards multipolarity, a more multipolar world, this is no straight, easy single direction trajectory. No way. For many of the, and you've given us brilliant examples of why that is, because of historical and current interconnections between the trading and financial interests of many countries in the global south and the United States and the Western powers. We just experienced the whole saga of French meddling in the Sahel, for example, and that goes on. And we thought that was going to be overtaken by Russia, but now France and the West are pushing back, and we don't know how that particular narrative is going to end. But none of this is easy or straightforward, and we've constantly got. I find in my monitoring of the Russian-Ukraine conflict, I find myself sometimes at the point of exasperation. With Putin, who seems, no matter how much he is provoked, and I believe he is provoked gravely by Europe and by the United States. Assassination attempts against his life, all kind of these drone swarms, attacks on Russian oil refineries, attacks on the Russian nuclear triad. All of these things, extraordinary provocations that one would never have dreamt possible during the Cold War, and yet, so despite all of this, Putin still seems determined to keep a door open to the United States. He doesn't give a fig really about Ukraine, other than he wants the Donbass. He doesn't really give a fig about Europe because, quite rightly, he has no respect for Europe. It's a gaggle of idiotic, silly, and often racist leaders, in my view. And I hope in future conversations I may have an opportunity to kind of further explore and develop that particular thought. But Putin still insists on keeping that door open. He he clings to the idea that there is going to be some existentially important trading opportunity with the United States. Maybe it's going to be, and I think this first of all came from Trump, the possibility of a tunnel under the Bering Strait, the Bering Straits, which connect, of course, Russia with the United States, or some other equally enormous project of that kind. Putin does not only want to look east. That's it. He wants to be able to look in both directions. And so I find that very, very interesting.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, if I may, perhaps this could be, my closing pitch.
Yeah. Okay.
Uh, I heard, there was a St. Petersburg, economic conference recently, and
Yeah.
Putin was asked questions about India, and this was also his response. India is a independent nation. It is going to build independent ties with the West and with other powers, including China and Russia, which suit it. So that's the kind of response he gave to India's ties with the West, and we kind of understand that. And now I would say the question of BRICS. I mean, now India is the chair of BRICS, and Trump doesn't like BRICS, and now we have to see how the BRICS summit goes in September.
Mm.
I do think that Prime Minister Modi would like some success with BRICS, something to showcase, and it is Putin is coming for the summit, and Xi Jinping is expected, and we do not know. Haven't had a confirmation as yet. Last week, Wang He was here for NSA's conference, and there is a thaw in Indo-China relations. Um, Again, I think thanks to America. Uh, so India would very much like President Xi Jinping to visit, um, and he's not going to visit just like that for fun. There has to be some meaningful progress, and India, as the BRICS president, will have to work to make that happen. There is an indication of that. The foreign ministers meeting did not yield a joint statement. It failed to yield a joint statement, but then there was a chair's statement. So this is part of official narrative. And now there is often you will find a lot of contradiction between what sometimes Prime Minister says and what Government of India says, how they act during crisis, and that's an important area to explore. But eventually, I think the official diplomatic narratives are important because of kind of this bombastic personal style that we have seen, which yeah, with Prime Minister Modi. But the official narrative, which tells what the official narrative is, and it was a good statement. It was a good statement. It talked most importantly. I think this is so important. I mean, we did not talk about a very central issue. Um, we have to talk, and the most one of the most central issues, that statement talks about Palestine. It talks about Palestine with a two-state solution with East Jerusalem as capital, and that position. I mean, can there ever be peace? While I mean, Lebanon is itself in question, but at least with Lebanon, you know that in the 80s, Israel was pushed back. But what about Gaza, right? So this statement, even though, we know that Prime Minister was in Israel 2 days before the conflict, and what Pepe Escobar calls motherland, fatherland bullshit, and he received a non-existent medal, you know, from Israeli Senate, which, but the official position, the official position is talking about uh, this two-state solution. That's one. The second thing, it is talking about Gaza, and it has clearly named Israel as an aggressor, both in Gaza and in Lebanon, where it is attacking United Nations peacekeepers, who, by the way, are Indians and Indonesians, and some Indonesians were killed. And Indonesia is a member of BRICS. Saudis are also unofficial members of the BRICS. They haven't ratified it, but they come and sit and do. I mean, they are under pressure from the United States. So the reason there could not be a joint statement, it said very clearly, was that UAE opposed certain things. Uh, and it did not oppose two-state solutions. It opposed a paragraph which talks about Gaza, and it is clearly mentioned that one member did not agree. So BRICS, BRICS meetings are becoming like a showdown between Iran and UAE. And will India as a chair step in to do something about it? Even the last meeting, the NSS meeting, was like that. I think there is another important point that came out, and I think this came from the heart of India, and that is sanctions, opposition to unilateral sanctions.
Good.
And I do believe that India genuinely does not like unilateral sanctions, because it is clearly, putting it at a disadvantage. And if you remember, when Marco Rubio came, the official position regarding the conflict in West Asia, the official position was that uh, all parties should adhere to international law. That was the first point. The second point was Strait of Hormuz should be safe and open for transit, commercial shipping. And the third point was sanctions relief. And the fourth point was about civilian life and stuff. So sanctions are, but it's not that they can do something about it, but they don't like the sanctions. So they are part of any architecture that helps them evade sanctions. But the dependency is so unbelievably high. And the dependency is this private sector driven dependency. And we have to have a whole episode on it. And it connects to the very top of the government.
So sanctions, the issue of sanctions being possibly one of the strongest possible sources of unity within the BRICS, which in so many ways is such a fragile alliance. For many of the reasons that this is a very sad but true reality. That's going to make this transition of the world order that so many of us would want to see is going to make it so difficult. I don't personally. I mean, of course, we need, of all the other things we need to talk about. We need to talk about Palestine. Personally, I think the two-state solution is a total dead end. Because Israel will never live with it. And if it was actually made a reality, Israel would immediately sabotage it. I hesitate to say this is an irresolvable issue, but I do see it. I do see solutions, but at the moment they are totally off most people's table. And I'm not going to go down there right now in the closing moments of this discussion. But Samantha, my friend, I have greatly appreciated this conversation. I have learned a great deal from you, and I hope that we can continue these lively, vibrant conversations through the WMD podcast series.
Thank you.
As soon as possible. So
Thank you.
I'm going to, just so that you know and our audience knows, as soon as possible, I'm going to send the recording of this discussion to our good collaborator Ben Thomason, who appeared in the first two episodes of the series, and I hope that Ben will be able to upload this to the YouTube channel as soon as possible. Take good care, and we'll meet again very soon, Samantha. Take good care. Bye now. Bye bye.
Thank you very much.